Holland.
Yeah, we actually got a royalty check. We got paid money for the airplay of the songs. And,
How much was it?
I framed mine as $8.63.
Well, that's a lot of money in Holland.
Something in the water taught me how to crawl. Something in the water taught me how to fall. Something in my blood.
Welcome, folks, to another Something in the Water podcast. I'm Uncle Dave Griffin. This is Mr. Sean Clark, Justin Mercer back here from Caution Light Media, and our guest, Billy Ray Herrin from Waycross, Georgia. Billy Ray Herrin is the owner of Hickory Wind Music Store. He is the renowned historian on Gram Parsons' early childhood life spent in Waycross, Georgia. And he and I have got a lot of stories to talk about, but we're glad to have you, Ray.
67 years of them here. First time I ever saw Dave, he was sitting on the rail fence in his front yard, and all the boys that year had got cowboy shirts with little rhinestones. And I walked up, and Gary said, "That's my little brother, Dave, over there." That's my first meeting of you.
Well, that had to be before Tripoli. And,
Yeah. It would have been, yeah.
The Arabs stole my cowboy suit over in Tripoli, but thank God you didn't steal my cowboy shirt in Waycross. Actually, we grew up on the same road together, Mount Pleasant Road in Waycross, which we ended up being called Dog Hill.
Yeah.
So,
Everybody had a dog.
there were a lot of dogs on Dog Hill.
Yeah,
You grew up across the street from me.
yeah.
And we had a lot of childhood memories there growing up together with all of our neighbors and friends. We played a lot of sports in James's backyard.
James Cox's backyard was our gathering because it was a pasture, and as he called it. And all our sports events went on back there, and all our music we listened to. And I started playing guitar after the Beatles had Sullivan's show. I was one of those kids that went out pretty quick and learned to play guitar. And so I played around for a few years and played in a couple of bands. And then Dave was already playing piano, so he already had some musical knowledge.
I had about...
And he was playing drums in the high school band. So I can't remember exactly how it come up, but, you always need a bass player. So I told Dave, I think you can play bass. So I teach him how to play Hey Joe on a bass guitar, and that's the beginning of the Dog Hill Gang.
Yeah, that's the beginning of mine and your musical.
And he gets one of his friends, Jake Lee, to play drums, and then we set out with the Dog Hill Gang. And
How old were y'all then?
It was out of college. It was out of college. It was
17,
about 17, 18
maybe.
years old. It was.
And we get our first gig at the VFW in Waycross, which I think we made $9 a piece. And the crowd broke out in a fight, and we had to go out the back door with our
There
equipment.
weren't nobody listening to us. The crowd was all in the front part of the lounge, and we were just back there playing for the doorman, who was Gary Keels.
Right.
And it was taking up money at the door, and your mama was there.
Yeah, she was one of the members.
Yeah.
But they did actually come back out there at one point into the crowd because they got in a fight. You don't remember the fight?
I told you that's too far
They got in a
back.
fight, and we had so little equipment we could leave in 5 minutes because we were singing out of our guitar amps. We had two plugs in each amp, so we plugged our mics and our guitars in each amp and turned them wide open. And probably invented 9-inch nails because all our vocals had to be distorted.
Absolutely.
So, but
our song list, and that was, let's see, I was off at Georgia Southern College.
Yeah.
This was right after graduation from high school. This would have been about October November of 71.
Yeah.
We landed the VFW gig. But I came home from Georgia Southern that weekend and didn't tell my parents that I was coming home, and spent the night over at Billy Ray's house. And Ray came home from South Georgia College.
Right.
And, of course, Jake, our drummer, was still
in
high school at that time. But we got together and rehearsed all afternoon Saturday. Our song list at the time was Creedence Clearwater, Chris Christopherson,
Bob Dylan,
some Grand Funk, and that was
yeah,
probably it.
because we played everything they wrote just about.
Right.
Yeah.
And
It's hard to believe
it was
we were
an
doing
innocent...
Bob Dylan Christopherson back then, you know.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
Yeah, you think
you know,
about it.
all the other bands, our contemporaries around Waycross were playing Doobie Brothers and a little more danceable stuff. We were going straight into the
almost Americana
before it was Americana. Country rock. That's what they called it back then. So we could, I guess you could call it, the name of that band was the Dog Hill Gang.
Yeah. And then surprisingly, it was before we even knew Gram had actually been the pioneer of country rock.
Had
We
no
were playing
clue at
country
that
rock,
time.
not realizing what it connected to us.
So then about
About a year later, maybe or two, we...
It was 73 that 73 was the year that Gram Parsons passed away, September.
Right.
And this is funny now. When you were off at South Georgia College in Douglas,
Right.
I remember you coming back one weekend and us getting together, and you said, one of the guys in my dorm told me that one of the birds was from Waycross.
Well, no, that ain't what happened. No.
Yeah.
Let me tell you how that happened. I was riding down the road in my Carnegie Volkswagen back in high school, and I heard it come on a local radio.
Oh, it was a DJ.
DJ said one of the birds from Waycross, and that's all I heard. I didn't get no details. So when I went to South Georgia College, I was a Goose Creek fan. I was listening to Goose Creek albums in my room, and this classmate of mine down the hallway come up and he said, "You like that?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I got an album you need to listen to in my room." So we go down there, and he's got the Gilded Palace of Sin.
Blind Burrito.
Yeah, and I know nothing else other than we listened to it. All I remember is the name, because that name stuck out.
All right.
And that was the only time I listened to it. Didn't remember even anything about it other than listening to it, and it always stuck in my head.
Yeah.
And then when we found out about Gram, I remembered him telling me about the Flying Burrito Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So we were getting something there.
We were.
But what happened, Dave picked up a Penthouse magazine. I don't know why.
For the articles.
For reading the articles.
Well,
Anyway,
I like to read, you know.
And he reads this article in there about this live performance of this musician by the name of Gram Parsons, and goes on in there, and the guy starts talking about him being from Waycross, Georgia.
Yeah, and that was it. That was like...
And Dave showed up to my house the
the
very
revelation that tied all those other things together that we considered suspect. When the DJ said one of the birds is from Waycross, we'd sit down and we'd hash it out. You know, we'd say, all right, the birds that we knew was Turn, 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 you know,
It
Tambourine
makes sense.
Man. And we looked at all the guys in that group and said, there ain't none of these people from Waycross, you know.
No.
Word travels slow. Things came to
then.
Waycross slowly back in
It
the
did.
day, you know.
You had to read Rolling Stone magazine to even know anything after 68.
You didn't have the internet. I mean, it was just a magazine, album covers, and what have you that we gleaned all of our information
I remember the day
from.
you came to my house, though. You had just left work from delivering.
I was in St. Simon's delivering some plywood, and I bought that Penthouse at lunch, and I read that.
Me and you sitting there and read it. We thought,
and hauled ass back to Waycross, straight to your house.
and we're sitting there and read it.
Here it is.
How can this be? You know, how do
The Waycross connection.
Yeah, and from that point on, I started researching a little bit from that point, trying to figure it out, which was hard to do back then. There wasn't nowhere to research until I drive home from South Georgia College in September, and Becky opens the door, and I'll never forget what she said. Guess who died? And I said, who? I know I said Gram, like that.
You knew.
I don't know what happened. I said,
Instinctually.
Gram, like that. And she said, yeah, he's dead. And he had only been dead a couple of days because the Associated Press story of his burning is what got in the paper. And I remember thinking, God, I mean, something just hit me like that. I got to figure this one out. I mean, I literally the next day went out and started researching, trying to find who, what, when, and where. And everybody I'd find would connect me to one other person. You see what I mean? And finally, I got pretty well down all the childhood stuff. It took a little while to get it done. And
How'd you go about that?
I would find one person, tell them about another person. And a lot of it was the older people that knew the Connor family. And I would go talk to them, and they would tell me, a lot of them didn't even realize Gram Connor had become Gram Parsons.
Let me just say a little something here for people who aren't familiar at all what we're talking about. There was a very influential musician by the name of Gram Parsons who lived the first 12 years of his life in Waycross. His name at that time was Gram Connor. His father passed away at an early age. His mother remarried to a Parsons fellow and changed his name to Parsons, but he was a huge influence. He played with the Byrds, the Flying Burrito Brothers. He influenced the Rolling Stones. He discovered Emmylou Harris, and he died tragically at the young age of 26 in 1973. And it was at that point what we're talking about. That's the point where you picked up the mantle and you started researching and interviewing.
Right.
And his daddy, at the time that they lived in Waycross in the 50s, his daddy was the manager of a box factory that built orange crates. Graham's grandparents were from Winter Haven. His mother's family was from Winter Haven, and they were like millionaires. They owned these big orange groves down there.
Largest citrus family in the world, actually.
The Snively Groves. Yeah. And once Graham's daddy married his mother, the family said, well, what are we going to do with this guy? So they stuck him in Waycross, Georgia, and said, build the crates for us to ship the citrus in. And that's how Waycross became home to Gram. But you interviewed a lot of the workers from the old box factory.
Yeah, I found a lot of the workers, and I did find a couple of his friends and talked to them. And they knew he'd become Gram Parsons. They just didn't understand the whole history. Most people couldn't understand what Gram Parsons had done unless they were deep into music. You see, you wouldn't really understand.
Henry Clark.
Henry and Dickie Smith were friends, but
they didn't know the influence.
And it was probably even more now they do, because I mean, especially after Ken Burns is. Anybody watched that, you have no denial of his influence. But we were early on understanding the influence because we were such big fans of the country rock music. We were all big Eagles fans, and it just amazed us when we come to find out that he's the biggest influence on the Eagles of all. And that's what we're into at the time. In fact, when I first come home from the Army, I bought an Eagles album at the PX, the first album, and this is before we knew about Gram.
Oh, yeah.
I brought you to my house and sit you down in between the two speakers and put the album on. I remember Dave just sitting there it was like Dave was hearing something he hadn't heard, because it was like hearing the Beatles almost.
Yeah.
You were hearing the Eagles, the first stuff, and it was so much different and better than contemporaries at the time.
It was. What I was amazed at is because it kind of came around full circle for me. The first music I ever listened to was Daddy's Hank Williams records,
Yeah.
And I loved them, all of those early Webb Pierce, Johnny Cash, Johnny Horton, all of that stuff, So as a child, but I got away from that as I grew up, started listening to AM radio and popular radio, and went through the Beatles and went through Led Zeppelin and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden in 1972, the Eagles come out, and it turns it right back around again.
Well, see, and we had already playing something similar to it. We were already doing Bob Dylan and Christopherson. We were doing country rock, even though I'm not even sure it had a term to it at the time. I mean, a genre, And then you hear that, and I remember Dave was taken by it the most because of the harmonies and everything. And then the Sweetbriar Band got born out of that.
Yeah, in about 74, we put another band together. And it was just you and me.
The Eagles were a big part of it. We were learning the Eagles stuff so much then.
And we were sitting around your trailer one day, and your father-in-law's old Gibson Les Paul was laying on the bed, and I picked it up, started playing a little bit of lead from Ramblin' Man.
Ramblin' Man.
And we had been talking about, well, who we're going to get to play what in the band. And Ray heard me pick a little lead. And he said, well, you can be the lead guitar player. And I said, I can? I wasn't no lead guitar player in a long shot.
You're pretty good for that.
But
you're pretty good for that.
But it was me on guitar, Ray on rhythm guitar, and then we hired Danny Altman on drums and vocals, and Harry Tankersley.
Tankersley. He brought him in as the bass player.
Was his name on bass, and we rehearsed in a little old practice house on Dog Hill, and named the band Sweetbriar, which was named after a rose that grows wild in the Okefenokee
Swamp. James Cox gave us.
James Cox, our next door neighbor friend, used to work out at the Okefenokee Swamp Park, and he
still
turned
a good
us
name
on to that.
Yeah. And the first real gig we talked James Harrington into letting us play at the Steakhouse for $150, which split up between 4 people. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weren't much money.
But we brought quite a crowd, so he hired us again.
Mm-hmm. It was on a Thursday night, right in between the regular bands. Played Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and he let us
play twice, and then I called him. Then he called us back up to play a third time, and I tried to push the price up. He said, "Nope, I ain't paying you $150." I said, "Well, we ain't doing this no more for $150." So, so from that point on, we started getting quite a bit of booking. I was doing some heavy calling. I finally started getting us booked good, and then we brought in Joe Shearer
on lead guitar. He was a sure enough lead
and Ricky
guitar
Alderman on piano, and the band really picked itself up. And then
what did you move to at that point? Did you play just acoustic?
We had 2 rhythm guitars,
and Joe was doing most of the lead then.
How many members is that?
6. Yeah. And we started getting a lot of bookings, a lot of school dances.
Played a good bit over in Bacon County,
but the music now,
Jessup.
The musical taste was changing then because Joe and Ricky was moving it more toward a different sound. It wasn't bad, but it was going away from country rock.
It was more Allman Brothers influenced.
Right,
some more of the southern rock thing was going on then.
Doobie Brothers, stuff like that.
Leonard Skinner and Wet Willie, Marshall Tucker, all those bands. We played it all. We played all that stuff.
Well, that's what the people wanted in the clubs. You played that. But I left the band anyway. I'll be honest with you, I wanted to write songs. That's the truth. Mm-hmm. I wanted to write songs so bad. I left the band and took my Stratocaster over an M&M Music over there and traded them even for that damn
Yamaha.
Yeah, that Yamaha. That's one of probably the best Yamahas ever built. Ep.5, nice. Set out to write songs, and from that point on, honestly, that's all I wanted to do was write songs. Have other people sing them, and BMI send me a royalty check or whoever.
Yeah.
Which I'm still waiting on.
Let me hold that guitar a second. I want to play a little snippet here of the first song that you and I ever wrote together.
Time.
It's called,
What's it called?
Time. It's real heavy. Now it's deep.
I was playing this little riff is what it was.
Is this Sweetbriar or is this
This was before any bands. It was probably about 72.
And I made this little riff up, and then me and Dave started writing words around the riff. And
you still remember it?
I do. I jotted the words down today. So it's pretty deep, philosophical, deep. Better not laugh at the wind. It'll take you away from your friends and the time that you spend. We'll be wishing to see 'em again. See how time flies as life goes by. You wonder why you even try. Deep.
That's pretty good though.
Wasn't too bad, you know.
That's pretty good.
No,
It could be a tornado song.
Yeah.
Oh my
The wind
God.
comes and takes you away from your friends.
That was
There was actually a little riff I did in there with it. And I can't remember how I did it.
yeah,
but
I know that wasn't the actual
some little riff or
actual-
something. I was playing it all the time, and then me
chords,
and Dave just starts writing the words to it, you know, and it just fell together. Kind of like Paul and John,
So-
kind of, you know.
That was our initiation. We
And then we
wrote
started writing a
together.
lot of songs.
Then we started songwriting individually.
We did, but
more
we had
so individually from each
notebooks, yeah.
other, and then
And then I set up my little studio in the backyard
Yeah.
with a little Sony machine, and that's when we started cutting our first demos on that Sony machine. And
and then we did fast forward into 1989 or so. You had been writing and recording in your studio.
well, back up first. Let's
Yeah.
go back to let's get this here. After the Sony machine, you bought a TAC machine,
Akai.
a Kai
Yeah, it was an
machine,
Akai.
and then we were able to do simul-sync record and get more tracks. And we got stuff done there, and we went to the back of Roy Crosby's funeral home studio. Roy,
Studio in the back of a funeral home.
Roy would walk in one room and whatever he was doing,
He'd consoled the
Yeah.
grieving.
yeah, and do whatever he did with the bodies, I guess, and then come back in and record us. And I remember we were in there recording one time, and Bruce Woods was playing drums, and he said, "Where's the drink machine?" And Roy said, "It's in the bombing room." And Bruce said, "I'll go across the road to the Hardee's and get me a drink." So we record stuff there, and me and Dave take our first big trip to Atlanta.
That's right.
We go to Bill Lowry's. We're gonna try to get in the door. We ended up at Rodney Mills,
Yeah.
and
Played him our songs.
and Cotton Carrier listened to our stuff, and they didn't nobody give us any contracts or anything. So we're planning on going on to Nashville to really make it. Except Dave locks his keys in his car, and it takes all our money to get the keys unlocked.
So then you
So we just come back home. So the Nashville trip got short.
Wow.
We stayed at Ross Speed's house.
Yeah.
Okay, well then, that was 1980, 81. It was right after John Lennon got killed.
Right, it
Right after
was.
Lennon, yeah. And from that point, I kept recording demos on what I had, and you did on yours. Kept doing it. To finally, I managed to get up enough equipment, build up a studio in the background and in the backyard, and I finally got enough money up to buy a Tascam 8-track reel-to-reel and half-inch, and an inline mixing board and a few pieces and master machine, and actually had quality for demos. Called you up to do the test. Remember? You came in to help me do the test.
Really?
On first recordings.
What did we do?
Something you wrote,
Ah,
and I don't remember what it was.
and this was before Gray Rider.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
and we do something of yours, and it's right along the time you were going through your first divorce. I remember that because you were having kind of a rough time there, but we were doing something of yours.
Yeah.
And you were doing all the tracks. We were just overdubbing them, just testing all the tracks and the audio out, you know. And then, I don't know next what happened, but finally, I brought Farrell Howell in. That's what it was. I
Yeah.
brought Farrell in, and I wrote songs for him, and he recorded them with his band. And I took them to Bill Lowry, and he liked them. He decided to publish them.
And one of them was the Gray Rider.
Well, that came later. No, he published 4 songs for me.
Dang.
And then on the 5th song, what happened was after watching Josie Wells' movie for 1,000 times, knowing all the parts to it, of course, I write a song to Gray Rider that's about that
Josie
Wells' story, and just kind of concepted it a little bit. And I thought, Waylon Jennings was a big fan of the Confederacy. Mm-hmm. Well, Waylon had already recorded America that Bill Lowry had gave him, that Sammy Johns had wrote, and it become a major hit for him. So I was going to do it like songwriters do. You target an artist that the publisher's already connected to. Mm-hmm. So I record Gray Rider myself in the store using a drum machine. I mean, in the studio with a drum machine. I played all the parts. Brought Tony Tatum in to do some lead for me just to get a kind of old Marshall Tucker lead sound on it. Send it up to Bill Lowry. I called Cotton on the phone. He had it, and I told him, I said, Cotton, this was my idea. Mr. Lowry, give this to Waylon. And Cotton said, well, I don't know. I'll give it to Mr. Lowry. We'll see. Like that. He didn't
Cotton Carrier was Bill Lowry's A&R man that you had to go through before.
Who was actually one of the famous A&R people who would give the Beatles Mr. Moonlight. Mm-hmm. And one of his great stories was Never Promised You a Rose Garden, gave it to Lynn Anderson. But anyway, at first he said, I'll make sure Mr. Larry hears it. Well, I don't think nothing of it. The next day I get a call from Bill Lowry himself at my house. Because I've never even personally talked to Bill at this point. I'm always talking to Cotton. You don't get into Mr. Lowry's door yet. Billy Ray, this is Bill Lowry. I really like that song, Gray Rider. He said, have you sent it anywhere else? And I had, but I didn't want to tell him because I didn't have an exclusive contract with him, and I sent it to this company called Hat Band Music. I'll tell you that story real quick, what happened there. Anyway, he said, we're sending this straight to Waylon. The contracts are on the way in the mail.
And Bill Lowry was a publisher.
I couldn't.
So there wasn't any money changing hands, but he was the publisher, and that was the first step as a songwriter.
I couldn't
get your song in the hands of a publisher.
Especially a major publisher.
Exploit it to a recording artist. If they recorded it, then the money started coming back in for both the publisher and the songwriter. So. And
but the funny thing, when he told me not to send it nowhere else, I had already mailed it to this company called Hat Band Music that I'd found in this book of publishers I'd bought. Because I seen I had this book of publishers that would tell you who they'd sent songs to, and I found this one called Hat Band Music, said they sent songs to Charlie Daniels and people like that. So I sent it to Hat Band Music. Well, I don't realize who I've sent it to until I call them back up on the phone. And no, the funny thing, I had called them before Bill Lowry called me. I always called to see, when I sent a tape out, I'd always call to make sure they received it. Mm-hmm. And I'd called this and got the secretary on the phone, and then I was telling her, who I was, that Bill Lowry had already published 4 of my songs. And anyway, I could tell she didn't want to hear it. Anyway, she got me off the phone pretty quick. Well, when Miss Lowry calls me and tells me not to send it nowhere else, I think, God, I better hurry up and tell them. So I called the same number back. And the girl actually said, oh, yeah, you're the guy that keeps claiming Bill Lowry's publishing your songs. I said, well, ma'am, I just want to let you know he just published another one. That's my 5th one. And she said, what did you say your name was? I said, Billy Ray here. And she said, I'll have to get Mr. Casmus to call you back up. Well, I didn't know who he was.
Who was he?
Charlie Daniels' manager. He owned the company.
Oh, okay.
Wow. So he calls me at the night. I'm in the studio recording a band in the studio for time, It's Douglas Casmus calls me up. And he said he hadn't even heard the song yet. He just called because of the conversation. Mm-hmm. He said, well, we can't take anything anyway because they were in the middle of a suit over long-haired country boys, something to do with that, and they couldn't accept nothing outside of staff writers. He said, well, he said, you actually got 5 songs with Bill Lowry? I said, yeah, in 1 year's time. He said, man, he don't publish with 100 songs a year like that. And I said, well, I got 5 of them. So that's as far as that ever went.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't turn into anything more than that. But anyway, I'd sent more stuff up, and I don't remember. I probably sent more, and I can't think what I did after that. But I remember realizing I had made a connection with Bill Lowry.
The largest independent music publisher in the world.
One of the greatest of all. I knew I'd made this connection with Gray Rider, and I can't remember at what point I called Dave on the phone. I told him, I said, listen, this time we need to sit down and try to make the best of this connection. and you come in and help me do this stuff. Mm-hmm. And then we got 7 more songs after that published, so it ended up in 12 in all. And then he liked the stuff, but he fell in love with you.
That song.
We took you up there. I never forget me and Dave took you up there. And Mr. Lowry, who always treated us good, he took that tape and stuck it in. And he was just looking at me and Dave, and you could hear the hiss coming from the machine. He turned that wide open. And you come on and played, and he just, man, he said.
Let me set this up a little bit. This is the biggest independent music publisher in the world, and he is a big man, too. Yeah. Big man, been in the business since the 50s, you know.
You got Beatles.
Old gray hair, full head of gray hair, you know. Big guy sitting behind a huge oak desk. Behind him was this wall of reel-to-reels and cassette decks and amplifiers and everything. And all over the walls going up the staircase and down the halls to his office were filled with gold records through the years. This guy that published Young Love by Sonny James, Bebop-A-Lula,
Walk On By,
that y'all sing.
Yeah.
Mr. Moonlight by the Beatles.
Walk On By, Leroy Van Dyke.
All
Mr.
Joe
Moonlight,
South, Billy Joe Roll.
Joe South, Billy Joe Roll.
Classics 4.
Classics
Atlanta
4.
Rhythm Section, yeah.
All of that was the history of this guy. And here we are sitting in these oversized leather chairs, you know, and I'm on this side of Bill Lowry sitting in the center, and I'm over here and Ray's over there. And he pops that cassette tape in.
That's our
and
demo.
Just turns the volume up. This is the first time he hears what we cut in the studio. And before the song comes on, before the tape spools through, you hear.
Yeah, he listened, but he was wide open on him. So.
And I was thinking, oh my God. And he's just leaning on his big desk like this,
staring
looking at Ray, and then he'd look over at me, not saying a word. No. And then the song comes blaring out, and he don't even blink, you know. He's listening to it and keeps looking back into at us. And when it's over, he jumps up out of his chair. Boy, he goes, "That'd be perfect for Conway Twitty."
Yes, sir. He fell in love, but he wanted us to change a few things.
Yeah.
Lyrics of the last verse. Because he wrote back and two with me on the last verse till I done what he wanted on the last verse, a little arrangement of lyrics.
That was a pretty song.
And we sent it in, and we waited. He give it so many months. He said, "I'm gonna give it so many months to see if Conway Twitty's gonna record it." And if he don't, we're coming up here to do this one. Well, sure enough, Conway never did it.
Well, you think he died?
Maybe
he might have died during that 6
right.
months because it was right around that time.
And Terry called me. Bill Larry's daughter called me and said, "Mr. Larry wants us to do this and release it." So we made the arrangement to go up there and record it at Larry's studio. And then we come out that about a 3-day session. We did You and Loving You in about 3 days. And we, at the end of it all, it was the trip back up the hill to Bill Larry's office. We go back on, and he puts on the master recording. And I'll never forget. And when he listened to You, because he liked you, the Loving You as well, but he just was taken by You. He jumped up behind that desk. He said, "Boys, this can be a big hit." And man, we were sitting there thinking, "My God, we finally arrived," you know. Yeah. And he said, "We're releasing this thing," and he puts it out on Southern Tracks label.
It was the first CD release on Southern Tracks to radio stations around the country.
In fact, the number on it's 0100. And Atlanta Rhythm Sections was the second one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we followed them. They followed us.
Yeah. Prior to that, they would send 45s out to the radio
and we were actually broke in to Armed Forces Radio because it was the same time the first Iraq invasion started. And we broke into that first. And then we broke into stuff out on the West Coast because I was getting stuff sent to me all the time.
Oregon was good.
And Washington. Yeah. And we didn't know anything about the things overseas until we got royalty checks from about 3 years later.
Yeah.
from BMI that it had actually broke into airplay, regular airplay in the Holland.
Yeah, we actually got a royalty check. We got paid money for the airplay of the songs. And,
How much was it?
I framed mine as $8.63.
Well, that's a lot of money in Holland.
Yeah, we were big in Holland, but there was. I remember they had two radio. I guess they called them promoters, or
Wade Pepper was one of them.
and they split the country by the Mississippi River.
Right.
West Coast was west, and then the East Coast. You
Yeah.
had two guys calling radio stations and saying, "Hey, play this, come on,
Right.
play this." It's after payola and drugola and all that stuff, where people could get airplay for favors, and it did well out west.
Yeah.
It didn't do much of anything in the East,
Did.
and but that was exciting. That was
Well,
an exciting.
And Mr. Larry always liked it, though. You know, Terry, his daughter, told me he played it all the time in his office.
Did he?
Yeah, she said we'd hear it all the time down the hallway. He just loved that song. It done something for him. But it was in his latter days, too. You know, he had already had his big impact in the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
If we'd came along 10 years earlier, it would have been different. Because
Yeah.
even he was losing the influence. Nashville was changing so much. He told me once that even he was losing that influence, you know. And he didn't get a lot of hits after that. If you think back, in the 90s, he didn't have many hits.
And one for Judd.
Yeah.
Naomi Judd.
Yeah, that Rock Bottom.
Or Winona.
Yeah.
What was her name? Winona.
Yeah, he didn't have many in the 90s. So we were probably right there at the last of his heyday, you know.
Yeah, after he passed away a couple of years later, his kids wound up selling his entire music publishing catalog
For $20 million. Largest
Sony.
Largest sale in U.S. history of an independent catalog. Sony ended up with all our songs.
So our songs traveled to Sony in Nashville.
Right.
And then a company out of California ended up buying it from Sony called the Bicycle Music Group.
Huge company. God almighty, huge. They bought all the Robert Johnsons, all the Billie Holidays, John Fogerty's, George Harrison's. They bought up all these catalogs.
Didn't Neil Diamond have something to do with that, or B.J. Thomas?
He had. It seemed like Neil Diamond was involved in it in the beginning. And what it is, they're a big movie.
They
It's
push
called
music to
Concord.
films.
Concord's the name of the company. Bicycle's the publishing, but they're big in the film industry. So that's where our songs are at today. Still waiting.
Still a chance.
Yeah, I mean, it never is.
Never know.
You never give up.
Oh, that's one of the quotes that Bill Lowry told us when we were up there. He said that this is what he told Joe South. He said, "Boys, the cream will always rise to the top." Yes, sir. You know, because Joe South wrote "I Never Promised You a Rose Garden" when he was 16.
Yes, sir. Sure did.
And I don't know how old he was by the time Lynn
Well,
Anderson recorded it.
what
but
happened
it
was-
just sat for all them years.
Cotton Carey kept telling them it was a country song. And so they released it with Dobie Gray rock format. They released it with Billy Joe Roll on the rock radio, all of them in rock, and Joe South. And it had 3 releases in rock radio in 67, 68, along in there, and it don't break into anything. And Cotton takes the song and gives it to Lynn Anderson. And she has the #1 song of the 70s year. And
70, yeah.
basically, he said, "I told y'all so." It's a country song. You see what I mean? But he also gave Brian Epstein Mr. Moonlight whenever Tommy Rowe had a #1 hit, "Oh Sheila," with Mr. Lowry. And he was sent over to...
Beatles actually covered that.
Yeah, and he was sent over to be the
When they were
headliner of a tour in
gigging.
England that the Beatles were actually second billed to in the beginning. And while over there, he gave Brian Epstein Mr. Moonlight, which would have been... Lowry had released it under the name Dr. Feelgood and the Interns. Mm-hmm. Roy Lee Johnson wrote it and didn't break nowhere. And so Epstein gives it to them in March of 63. And October 64, they record it. Mm-hmm. So another one of Cotton Carrier's good moves. You know, and it ends up even better in the cartoon. So it ain't just a single on radio; it's a cartoon single. Remember?
Yeah.
It's one of their cartoon skits. The Beatle cartoons. Yeah, the Beatle cartoon, Mr. Moonlight, gets chosen as one of the cartoon songs and even becomes more known because of the cartoon. Yeah, because it had a skit to it about a moonlight or something, you know.
Were you feeling like playing this one of your songs?
Let's see.
I know you wrote a ton of them.
Let's see. Well, let's see. This is a Cardboard Shack. There was an old man who lived on the edge of town. I used to go down and see him sometimes before the sun went down. He cooked his food on an open fire beside the railroad tracks. Every night he laid his head in a cardboard shack. Told me, son, a man never knows what's around the next bend. And some hearts get broke so bad they can never mend. And sometimes the hurt's so much the pain won't end. And some folks hit bottom and don't get back up again. The old man died one cold winter's day. In a cardboard shack on the cold ground he lay. Just one more homeless soul in these times so real. Just one more lonely grave on Pauper's Hill. He told me, son, a man never knows what's around the next bend. And some hearts get broke so bad they can never mend. And sometimes the hurt's so much the pain won't end. And some folks hit bottom and don't get back up again. Tonight I'll sleep in a warm bed. Be thankful to have a place to lay my head. Somewhere someone will sleep in a cardboard shack on the edge of town down by the railroad tracks. I tell you, son, a man never knows what's around the next bend. And some hearts get broke so bad they can never mend. And sometimes the hurt's so much the pain won't end. And some folks hit bottom and don't get back up again. There we go.
All right.
Good one.
My homeless song.
Yeah. Did Lowry publish that one?
No, I never did. I sent it up there. You know, he always wanted the hits.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's what he was always in the market for, which is what we tried to do.
Right. Yeah.
And we did.
We
wrote
gave it a good try.
We just didn't get the hit.
Yeah.
We wrote the hit.
Yep.
But you know, it's much funner really writing the stuff you want to write like that.
Yeah.
Well,
It's just trying to make a living doing it, you know.
well, speaking of making a living in music, here's another angle that ties us all together is
Right.
that your son is the bass player in Sean's
Right.
band, the Pine Box Dwellers.
That's
and
it.
Jesse Herrin,
And so is yours.
and my son is the
Right.
drummer in the
There we
Pine
go.
Box
Yeah.
Dwellers.
And y'all started as bands together. Now y'all sons are in a band together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like Dog Hill carries on.
Yeah. And our new friend that we made last year, Larry Murray.
Larry Murray.
So now we back it all the way up.
All right, let's
Okay.
talk about Larry Murray for a minute for people out there. Larry Murray originally was from
Born in Waycross.
born
lived,
in Waycross.
lived in Waycross his first 9 years. And actually was born in 37 here. And raised by his grandmother till he was 9. And she died when he was 9. And he was kind of switched around by family members for a while. And he ended up in Blackshire in the Marion boarding house, 9 miles from Waycross. Raised there till he graduates from high school, 55, from Blackshire High. And he ends up joining the Navy and ends up in San Diego as a diver in the Navy, and comes out. And in 61, he opens the infamous, legendary Blue Guitar Store. And the Blue Guitar Store, historically now, historians have went back and realized the California music scene dates back to Larry Murray and the Blue Guitar Store. And in that store, he creates a band called the Scottsville Squirrel Barkers that has Chris Hillman, who's original Birds later, Bernie Ledden, who's original Eagles later when they're teenagers. And they played in this bluegrass folk band called the Scottsville Squirrel Barkers. And they become quite well known. And they set up a live stage in the store. And finally, a lot of musicians start hanging out there. They end up being quite well known later on. And
Is this a music store, like an instrument store?
yeah, it's a music store, a luthier shop, lessons, and a live show. And everything's in there. They just try to do it all, you know.
They start having open mics.
And started having open mics in there. Well, the Scottsville Squirrel Barkers built a stage for them to perform themselves, and then people start coming playing. They end up with people like Hoyt Axton, Mason Williams, you know, Linda Ronstadt, Bernie Ledden, of course, Chris Hillman, all those California musicians hanging out there. And then Larry forms Hearts and Flowers, and brings Bernie Ledden back in with that, and they get a Capitol record contract in 67, and they do 2 albums, which is some of the first really country rock stuff. And Graham shows up, of course, in 67, joins the Byrds, and shoots more Waycross into what becomes country rock. And Larry stays with Hearts and Flowers until he starts working in TV. Actually helped Glenn Campbell set up the Glenn Campbell Good Time Hour. And then Johnny Cash hires him to help do the Johnny Cash show. And
As a writer.
as a music writer. And he writes 6 White Horses for Johnny.
As a songwriter.
As a songwriter, and he writes Bugler for the Byrds, which is one of their most well-known songs. Clarence White sang it, who was one of Larry's good friends. And, of course, Larry went on later on to write a number of songs for Chris Christopherson and David Allen Coe, Olivia Newton-John, Percy Sledge, the Dillards, you know, the Walker Brothers. I mean, he just wrote tons more songs. Bellamy Brothers. He just found out one the other day.
Yeah.
The other day he told me, he said, there's a song I wrote for the Bellamy Brothers. I can't find it. See if you can find it. Well, first he said, I wrote it for those 2 brothers out of Florida. I said, which ones? He said, the Bellamys.
Well,
And he said, it's called Bound to Explode. Well, I found it. And it was an actual video, professionally done video of the song. And I tapped it and put it on his Facebook, you know.
how did y'all meet? You and Larry meet?
I knew
Was it-
about Larry for years. I just could not find him. I knew way back. I can't even remember how far back that he had wrote 6 White Horses and Bugler. I knew he was from Waycross. That's all I knew, those 2 things, 3 things. And somewhere back in the 90s, I got one of John Beelan's phone numbers from from those girls that was putting out the Cosmic American News.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to find out where Larry Murray was because I knew John Beelan would always give him credit for being in the industry. I get John on the phone. He won't tell me how to get in touch with Larry. So I gave up but I was always posting stuff on Facebook about Larry's songs that I'd already discovered. And Gary, of course, he had some kin people in town here too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
Gary, my buddy Gary Murray.
Gary Murray and Gary's daddy Ken.
Mm-hmm.
And when John Beelan come played with us at the Marty Stewart show,
Mm-hmm.
he come and hung out in the store with me for hours that day. And I said, listen, now doggone it, you're going to tell me how to get in touch with Larry Murray this time. Okay, I'll show you how. So he shows me. I send Larry a message. And Larry accepts my friendship on Facebook. And that was all. And I just still posting up a few things. And then in January of last year, I think it seemed like it was right after the turn of the year, I was sitting there and the phone rings, pick it up, my store phone, and it's Larry Murray. And we just become the best of friends. And he starts telling me his whole story. And then I start really figuring it all out. And the more I researched, the more he told me, then I started coming up on the fact that what I thought I'd come up on was that the whole California music scene had started at the Blue Guitar Store with Larry and all the events that happened. Well, now the Country Music Hall of Fame's figured it out. And they're actually doing a professional research on it where they're going to actually do a full display in the Country Music Hall of Fame and basically show how in '61 the blue guitar sparked a movement in California that ends up being the Byrds, the Poco,
Eagles.
Flying Burrito Brothers, Buffalo Springfield, a lot of solo artists, that came out of there. And then it ends up the Eagles. And that's what they're wanting to show, how this little old music store ends up
catalyst
being the number one
that.
American band of all time in record sales, the Eagles. And it starts basically with a guy from Waycross, Georgia. But you also got Gram Parsons coming in there on this display. So they're going to show how he comes in and shoots another spark into it. And then
2 Waycross boys.
Yeah, and when you sit back and think about it, how did this happen? A little old town like Waycross, Georgia has 2 people going in and literally influencing the course of music history.
That's because there's something in the water.
Something in the water.
Folks,
that's it.
That's why they call it
Something in the water.
I mean, it's still hard to believe to me.
It's pretty fascinating.
It is. And Larry knows it. I mean, Larry sees it, and he sees what's going on here and now. And it amazes him what he saw when he come to the festival last year and played. And what he just saw out there at that festival had an impact on him at 83 years old.
The festival he's talking about is the annual Gram Parsons Guitar Pulling Tribute Festival that I started in my backyard in 1998, and these 2 fellas right here were there at that one too.
There we go.
So for 23 years now, we've been having good music in Waycross, and in honor of Gram Parsons. And Larry Murray was one of our featured performers just last year.
Got up and did 6 White Horses and Bugler with us.
Yeah.
But it's back to this whole idea of what y'all are talking about here, what we've been talking about for a long time, but it don't make sense. To me, it just still don't make sense for a little town like
seems like there
Georgia.
is something in the water, or there's something in the, cosmic energy of it all, because
humidity.
It took the Beatles
Maybe it was.
to influence us to step into music, and to pick up an instrument and everything, form a band. But that mysterious thing that you keep talking about, I don't know what drove us to put Chris Christopherson albums on our turntable in the middle of
and that didn't be one of Larry's
Led
best
Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix psychedelic
let me tell you where Chris fits
we were
in.
listening to that.
Let me tell you where Chris fits in with Larry. Chris had slept in his room many a night, and in his hotel Ramada Inn suite, Johnny Cash had him a suite.
Yeah.
Well, Waylon and Chris and Mickey Newberry didn't have anywhere to live. They slept on this floor many nights. And isn't that something? Now, we were playing Chris' songs all that time back there, and they're influenced by Larry.
Why were we doing that? Why did we go there before we knew about Gram Parsons, before we knew about Larry Murray and all.
It's something
strange.
Yeah, something from our past. Because,
Something
like you
pushed
said,
us.
you grew up listening
Daddy's
to Hank Sr.
records and
I grew up listening to what Mama and them was all listening to. Which was,
How mainstream was Chris Christopherson then? I mean, probably was it would y'all consider that something underground?
He had already
found?
written those great songs.
As a songwriter, he was. I picked up his albums
the albums
when I was
is
in
what-
college. I grabbed his 2 albums when I was in college because, like I said, songwriting. Let me go back to my event when I realized I wanted to be a songwriter. I got to tell you this one. I was a big fan of Blown in the Wind. So Mama buys me a 45 of Blown in the Wind in probably 62 or 3.
Peter, Paul, and Mary's
Peter
version.
Paul's version. This was a #1 hit. That's really the song that brought Bob Dylan into the world. I mean, it's his first major royalty check.
Mm-hmm.
He got like $5,000 royalty check from the first royalty check off of that song. First time he ever had any money in his life. But anyway, she buys me this record, and I love the song. But my eyes go down to the guy's name under the song, not Peter, Paul, and Mary.
In parentheses.
It says B. Dillon, I think. Something like that. I think it is. It wasn't Bob. It said B. Dylan. I thought it was Dylan instead of Dylan. And I thought, whoa, now who's this guy here? And I'm only about 12 years old now. I'm telling you, this is what, 63 or maybe I'm 11 or 12. And I'm thinking, man, I'm more interested in this fellow than these 3 singing this song. That's where I realized I want to write songs. So I started writing songs within weeks of learning to play guitar. Mm-hmm. I can't find them, thank goodness. but
we always talk about that on here, about how those early songs, every song you've written in your life, they ain't all good.
Well, Mr. Larry told us to rewrite, remember?
Yeah.
Rewrite, so. Yeah. I've got composition books, I'm telling you, stacks that big.
I got stuff I ain't never thrown away.
And I don't even know
first songs
what
I
the
ever
melodies
wrote.
of them are. I'll pull up the lyrics and find them in there. I don't even know how the hell to sing them. I don't know what the melody of the songs are.
Long gone.
And then you steal
gone.
from the lyrics too. Larry told me he's done this all his life. So you go back, you steal this one line out of this song that ain't nothing else in it but that one line.
Yeah.
And you move it to another one.
That's right. I've never thrown anything away. I don't know why I was so disciplined like that in the beginning, but after reading other songwriters talk, you know, established songwriters talk, they always say the same thing.
I remember the first
Don't
good
throw
song
anything away.
Dave wrote was wrote from one of his girlfriends, a girl he liked. Annabelle or something.
Annabelle. Yeah, her name was Ann Bell, so I just wrote a song.
Annabelle.
That was one of the first songs
that was
I
a
wrote,
good song.
called Annabelle.
Good melody. That was the first time I noticed a good melody in Dave's songs. And,
when Ray taught me the bass line for Hey Joe,
that's right.
all he had in his bedroom was an old Silvertone guitar with the 4 bottom strings on it.
Right.
The B and the E had busted.
I made it for bass.
So
yeah.
he said, well, this is the same as a bass here. and I went crazy and learned the bass. But I realized I couldn't, I wasn't coordinated enough to sing and play bass at the same time.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I realized that I wanted to learn how to play rhythm guitar.
Right.
And I know I really put him through hell.
Well, we
then,
started doing duet together on acoustic.
Yeah, but when I was first learning how to change chords and
you
everything,
were framming a lot, I remember.
it was hard going there, and I think we almost lost friendship with one another through that. It's like, damn, Dave, go home and practice.
Well, we finally got a duet going, and we actually recorded a bunch of stuff on a cassette machine doing duet. You remember that little old Norelco cassette machine I bought?
Like a shoebox?
Yeah, we recorded a lot of stuff and got us a couple of gigs, you remember.
Playing for the Memorial Drive.
That, and we played at the Worth County High
Football
School for something
banquet.
other. Yeah.
Pee Wee football banquet.
Yeah, yeah. We did that too.
I remember whistling on it. We played a Neil Young song, and I whistled the harmonica part, and some woman came up to me afterwards and said, "You've got the most beautiful whistle." Oh, Lord. Well, We have traveled down
Well, we're still doing it. That's the thing.
the
You know,
historic road here tonight. Now that goes back into the past.
well, we are the generation that got to experience the greatest period of music history.
I think so. I've always said
We
that the
come of age
that
right at the
decade
point,
of the '60s
Yeah.
was one of the greatest.
and we got to follow it every day and every one of its changes.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Certainly, it was a good time to be alive. Yeah.
yeah.
And I know every generation probably lays claim to that, and those generations after us look at us like, yeah,
But they
bunch
seem
of
to,
old men
they seem to go
talking
back
about their
to it.
music.
Well, in the 90s, I think it was all the bands that were coming out then were influenced by, it had been long enough that that those classics had come back around, and they were trying to imitate it poorly. But that's how, when I started listening to music and really just learning to play and stuff, and I was like, one of those bands would cover a Neil Young song,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
and I would go back and I'm like, who's this?
Yeah.
And that's how I fit.
Yeah.
And then, so it is the better generation for sure.
Well, it was the most original generation, at least probably.
Bore a lot of fruit, that generation.
The record
Or
labels,
that
yeah.
decade did. That decade it came in, 1960 came in as meek
Yeah.
as a lamb.
Well, you couldn't even turn the radio on and find a bad song. Think about it.
Yeah.
You turned the AM radio on, every song on there was a good song. Can you imagine that?
And by the end of the 60s, it was
Boy, that's changed.
Yeah.
it was the Beatles,
Yeah.
had from 64 to 70. It was the Beatles grew up, musically, and we grew up
Yeah.
exponentially. But when it started out, it was like, remember rock and roll, they thought they had killed rock and roll
Yeah, yeah.
by 60. Buddy Holly was gone. Elvis was in the Army. Jerry Lee Lewis had married his 13-year-old cousin and didn't have any relevancy anymore. And who was the other one? But
Well, the labels tried to tame it all down.
they tried to knock it back down and everything. And so moving right into the 60s, you had just some very bland music going on. It was
Early 60s, yeah.
Fabian, Paul Anka, all them single name, them one name guys.
Right, yeah.
Bobby V, Bobby Rydell,
Bobby Vinton.
and
Yeah.
and then you even had a singing nun at one time.
Right, yeah.
It was folk tried to make a little movement right in there.
Right,
the folk
they did.
music did,
And they did.
And then slowly, you started by about 62, 63, you started getting Four Seasons,
Yeah. Yeah.
and their records sounded different.
Yeah.
It just sounded different.
Yeah.
And the Beach Boys,
It's a bunch of harmony
Right.
bands and stuff.
harmony bands, but their sound, the production was different
It
coming
was.
at you.
Right.
And then of course the Beatles, and by the end of the decade, I mean it was just like fast
I
forward,
tell
light
you,
speed,
another
the way
thing
the music changed.
that changed so fast, and I don't know if you ever realized this, but by the time the Beatles were successful enough to have large audiences, the audio engineers and technology wasn't ready for it. So their crowds were so big, they were singing sometimes through the horns in stadiums or something. They didn't have monitors or anything. In fact, monitors were invented in Atlanta, Georgia in a 1965 Beatle concert. The engineer at the Atlanta Stadium invented monitors, experimenting, hoping the Beatles could hear better because they couldn't hear, and invented monitors.
Wow.
And they went crazy and wanted him to travel with them the rest of the tour. But you look at that period, like say 64 and 5, and they're still trying to sing through the announcing horns at Shea Stadium. By 69, you got scaffolds of sound at Woodstock.
Mm-hmm.
You went from two track live recording to 24-track recording from one half of a decade. Look how fast that all moved.
That second half of the 60s,
Yeah.
it was just like boom, it
Yeah.
just blew up. The Beatles changed a lot of that. But That was a decade now to remember. And they say if you lived in the '60s, then you shouldn't remember it. Because that thing was, not only was music changed, but socially you had civil rights, you had women's rights, you had drugs and everything were being experimented with, you know. Yeah. And
what about the Beatles burning, the record burning?
That happened right here in Waycross, Georgia.
The most famous picture of the Beatles burning ended up being in Waycross, Georgia. We always got famous for something, didn't we?
And it was behind a radio station on Carswell Avenue at the time was called WAYX, 1230 on your dial.
I got to experience, and my first cousin, who was always in the middle of everything, and taught me into going, Johnny Bennett. So we go. We don't have any intention of burning anything because we didn't take nothing with us. I don't think we had an intention of leaving there with anything. But anyway, we're there with a bunch of kids. There's about, I'd say, a couple hundred people out there. And people throwing records, and the radio station was burning more than the people were. That was the funny thing. They were burning their records. We might have grabbed theirs instead of. But anyway, we'll get the story. Johnny got on the microphone, and they asked him a question.
One of the DJs says, what do you think about the Beatles?
And he said, I think the Beatles stink. And he handed it back to the DJ, and he walked straight over to me, and I was right outside the darkness there, outside the campfire. And he said, let's grab them 2 albums and run like hell to Alice's. So Alice was his sister, lived down behind the station. So I grabbed Something New, and he grabbed Meet the Beatles. They were the American versions of their releases. Mm. And like I've said before, Satchel Paige said, never look back, something might be gaining on you. We were running like hell through the dog kennels. You know. And the next day, we put on a tribute to the Beatles and played speakers out their window so the crowd would hear it on the highways out there.
Rebellious.
You know.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You want to take a short little break?
Sure.
But that's, you know, it's amazing when you think about what happened in this town. And then when Larry gets pulled into this thing, you just got to shake your head. Mm-hmm. I mean, you really got to shake your head. And I wonder if we kept backing it up, we're gonna find something else. You know what I'm saying?
It'll have to be somebody else.
I mean, you know.
Something in my blood starts to take a hold. Something in my bones start to lose control. Something in the water gonna make me whole. Something in the water gonna make me see. Something in the water gonna set me free.
So, tell him who you calling.
Oh, I'm gonna let him know. Oh, y'all are.
Well, folks, we're gonna try our first call out. We're gonna see if Larry Murray will pick up the phone. Larry Murray, the famous songwriter from Waycross, Georgia.
Sound like I was moving to a voicemail.
Hello.
Larry.
Hey, Billy.
I'm on a live podcast in Waycross, Georgia called Something in the Water.
Hey, Larry.
Yeah, you know, I heard, I read something about that. I didn't understand what it was.
Well, Dave Griffin and Sean Clark sitting in here with me, and Justin Mercer, who actually runs the podcast. He's the guy that does the caution light videos I know I told you about.
Yeah.
We're doing a podcast. I got invited to be the guest tonight, so I've been telling all kinds of stories on me and Dave growing up, and I had to bring you into the story because you're part of the Something in the Water here, Larry.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Hey, Larry. It's Dave Griffin. We wanted to. Me and Sean wanted to invite you next time you're down here in Waycross to come be a guest on the podcast yourself.
I'll do it.
Awesome.
I'm not scared of anything, man.
So we made you guest tonight anyway, by California way. So we've been talking about you. I've told a little bit of your history in here. And I thought, I'll just call him and see. So here we are.
Good enough.
Anything you want to say?
Is there any tornadoes out there in California?
No, they said
we have earthquakes. The earthquakes are a little. I kind of like them better than tornadoes because earthquake, by the time it hits and you pick your ass up off the ground, it's over.
Ain't no time to be scared.
The thing about a tornado, you see the thing coming and you can mess your pants.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
And then not get blown away, and then you're embarrassed.
Well, I've been telling them some of your history here, Larry, from growing up in Waycross, from living on Colquitt Street and living in the old Marion boarding house. So you'll end up on the podcast anyway. So,
well, that's good.
We're talking about how two Waycross boys brought all the California rock sound out there.
Yeah, we actually been talking about how you in '61 and Gram shows up in '67 and he shoots that Waycross, Georgia, into the California music scene there.
Well, it's kind of always been there. It should be, like I told you before, it should be the new Muscle Show.
Yeah. Well, I think
Somebody come down there and build a studio.
Oh yeah, and Waycross, you're talking about? Yeah. That's what. Yeah, that's what I was telling them. Yeah.
If I decide to do another, CD or something like that, I'm going to do it down there. We'll do it in your store.
Hell yeah. Well, Justin Mercer's got a studio set up in his house right here. That's where
we're at.
I'm Box Dwellers recording. We're doing the podcast actually in this building out here. He's a very good engineer. Getting some good stuff out now.
Well, I'm sure there's, it can be done. I was, when I was back there, for the Gram thing, I was knocked out about so many musicians. When I grew up back there, like we talked about, there weren't that many musicians except the piano players at church.
Yeah.
And they didn't know how to play rock and roll, so.
No. And the barbershop quartets.
Yeah, that's right. We didn't need any instruments for that.
Well, there's a lot of musicians down here now, that's for sure.
I know, it's amazing, and I tell you, I didn't hear a bad one down there. That's why.
Good songwriters, yeah.
Which musician that was in that whole bunch?
Yeah, a lot of good songwriters as well. Good bands. It's been here for all these years, but you took it out there, whether you realize it. You took it out to California, and you influenced the California music scene. That's just a simple fact. And
well, that's what they say. Chris and Bernie and I.
Yeah.
And Herb.
There ain't no doubt you did, buddy. I mean, that's a fact. That's not.
No, we had our fingers in everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But how about that tornado in Nashville?
So far, 22 dead.
Mm.
I know right where it was. It went right through. I have friends that live in that area,
Yeah.
Belmead and East Nashville.
Yeah, right.
And it's wiped that place out. I text them. I haven't heard back from them. I'm sure they're okay.
I hope so.
Yeah. We got kind of the same storm here, but a lot weaker, A lot of rain here.
Yeah, I called as soon as I heard about it. My daughter lives up in Clarksville. She was north of it, but they had some bad weather there too.
Right. Yeah.
But we don't have anything here but earthquakes. We need some rain is what we need.
Earthquakes and wildfires.
Oh, yeah. Don't forget the wildfires.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. Our fire season now is official 360 days a year.
Yeah.
Wow.
It is. It used to be in the fall when we'd get the Santa Ana winds and everything. But now it's there was a big fire going yesterday up in Riverside.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I've been telling them about the Scottsville Squirrel Barkers here, where that all started and where that all went. Hearts and Flowers. So, you know, it's
Well, we'll have plenty to talk about if when you come back down to South Georgia and get you on this podcast, we'll have a lot of questions to ask.
Well, I can give you an answer whether they're true or not.
That's what we like.
that's the Southern way.
Sometimes the real answers aren't very interesting.
No, never get to let the truth get in the way of a good story in the South.
Yeah, partly truth and partly fiction, I
Yeah,
say.
that's right. And that was, what'd you say, that was about Mickey Newberry? Didn't you say Chris wrote that about Mickey?
No, I think he was, when Chris came up with that line, I think it was in regards to Johnny Cash.
I thought you told me that Mickey was always telling lies and he was always calling him out on it. In your
Yeah, but I think that phrase, you know, partly truth and partly fiction, I think he was referring to John.
Might have been,
you know, if my memory serves me. No, Mickey just why am I laughing? He's dead. You know? He's a funny guy, man. I love that guy. And him and Chris was into it all the time. Chris didn't bust him because he lied, because Mickey came up with these weird stories and everything, and Chris would pin him down, and you know, and he'd say, "Well, where did you hear that?" You know, and Mickey would say, "Well, I read it," and Chris would fall on the floor laughing and says, "Oh, you read it? Well, that makes it true, I guess." But we used to sit up there in my room. And I tell you, I wish I could remember some of the stuff that went on up there. It was hilarious. And not only that, everybody else hung out at the Ramada, and they all ended up in my place.
Of course, because you had a place.
Yeah, and I'd have to leave. They'd stay up so long and get to roaring up there, and I'd have to sleep in the office. But that was the hangout.
No telling how many songs got written because of your Ramada Inn suite.
I don't know.
No telling.
You know that? Yeah, I don't know. I hadn't heard any regarding that Ramada Inn thing. I
read that thing Linda Ronstadt wrote in her biography where she said that when she showed up there for the Johnny Cash show, she got left, and you found her down in the lobby. And she said she was scared because she was left by herself, and you found her down there and took her up to your room, and you had Christopherson and Mickey Newberry and I think Waylon Jennings in the room writing songs.
She went in my room, and she looked in there, and there was Chris and Mickey and Waylon.
Yeah. Wow.
And she felt right. That was okay. That cleared everything up.
Yeah.
But I'd saved her bacon a couple of times. She was going to do the Campbell show, and she was in there in the pre-production talking to the director or something, you know, and everything. And she was using some pretty foul language. She cussed like a sailor. And they were kind of put out about that. And I told her she should apologize to them and, you know, and everything. And I guess the next day she did. And the director said, Linda came in and says, "I want to apologize for using all those, you know, bad words and everything, and everything." And they said, "Oh, that was okay," you know. And she says, "Well, I knew I'd fucked up when I started." She was something else, man. She was a sweet girl.
She said, did she say she sang better without underwear on? Those what she told Johnny Cash, wasn't it?
I don't know. No, June didn't like that, man. June was really upset when she, you know, found out Linda didn't wear any underwear.
She went and bought her some.
I don't know.
Supposedly, that's what Linda said in her biography. June went and bought her some and made her put it on before she did the Johnny Cash show.
Wow.
And I think she passed Johnny in the hallway, and Johnny asked her, how does she like her new drawers? And she said, I like it, but I think I can sing better bare-assed.
Really?
That's in her biography, so I don't know.
Well, that's about something like that. That's what she would say, probably.
Well, buddy, we appreciate you hollering at us. I think we're going to let you go now because I'm afraid that if we keep on talking about, we won't have anything to talk about when you do get down here. We keep running these stories out there.
Billy Ray and I'll come up with something.
Yeah, I know you will.
Well, whether it's true or not.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll see you, Larry.
Good talk to you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, we hope that you enjoyed that little audio segment there, a phone call with the legendary Larry Murray, or original Waycross, Georgia boy, who made it big out in California and influenced a lot of your favorite musicians along the way. Well, folks, what do we got? Do you want to, how are we sitting on time?
You play that Dog Hill song he's going to play.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. This
Pick.
nah, I'm good. If I can remember the words, this song talking about a place that Billy Ray and I grew up in Waycross called Dog Hill. It's called The Ballad of Dog Hill.
Okay.
Oh, 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 oh. Slick Tick and Sharky were lying on the grass, talking about the future, the present, and the past. Thinking about cars like capitalistic boxes. Never at all dreaming of the need for speed. Never dreaming of the need for speed. Slick Tick and Sharky. Slick Tick and Sharky were playing in the field where the bulls run wild with their hooves of steel. Black eyes, barbed wire, and broken bones, waiting on an angel for to call them home. Waiting for to call them home. They was all raised up in a good part of town, had a comfortable life when the sun went down. Living high at the top of Dog Hill, watching the world turn and doing what they will. Just watching and doing what they will. Slick Tick and Sharky and Birdleg Ray went to the devil's house one day. Fire and brimstone was burning all around. When the last saw Satan, he was leaving town. Oh, Satan, he was leaving town. Now Slick is in hot Atlanta, talking on the phone. Tick is in old England, just trying to get home. Sharky's on Dog Hill and asked for Birdleg Ray. He got drafted in the army and he's calling home to May. He drafted and he's calling home to May. They was all raised up in a good part of town, had a comfortable life when the sun went down. Living high at the top of Dog Hill, watching the world turn and doing what they will. Just watching and doing what they will. Oh, 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 oh.
That's a good one.
You bird leg, Ray?
Bird
Well,
legs, Ray.
That's what I got called a few times. I actually got called.
Because you had bird legs?
Well, one time I got called the Great White Herrin because Mama bleached my baseball suit out, trying to get all the clay out of it. And so I'm standing out in the field. Everybody else has got
And you were
kind
standing
of half.
out.
They got these red suits, kind of feathered red. I got white. So they start calling me the Great White Herrin.
Yeah, we both, you and I, well, when I was living on Dog Hill, which we was in the service, so we moved around a good bit. Y'all stayed put.
Yep.
We'd always come back for a half a year or a whole year or until Daddy retired, and we moved back for good. But times we were here, you and I went to the same elementary school.
Right, Memorial Drive Wildcats.
The Memorial Drive.
That's where I went.
Wildcats.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got a little alumni group here.
That's right. Yeah.
Wildcats.
Wildcats.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Every Saturdays we all went to the matinees downtown, the Ritz and the
God,
Lyric.
that was good. Good
Quarter to
memories.
get in, you could stay all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah. Larry even remembers that, going to the Lyric.
Yeah.
So it was going on at the same time. Parents could leave you all day. It was like a babysitting. They'd drop you off. And give you, they give you $1. You got in for a quarter, and you could eat all the candy and popcorn you want for 75 cents, and watch John Wayne and Tarzan movies over and over because they'd repeat them,
It'd be like when you sat down in your seats, the camera would come on, and it'd be like the first thing you saw was a serial, which is a continuing saga, from weekend to weekend, And then they'd have some local advertisements up there on the big screen. You'd see all these local people in the Hart's Jewelers and different businesses around town. And then they'd play some cartoons,
Woody Woodpecker,
a few
always.
cartoons, and then the first feature would come on. And after the first feature was over, there'd be more cartoons and more advertisements. Then the double feature, second feature would come on, and it was like an all-day thing.
And the funny thing was the kids would be in little factions. Like you'd have the quiet kids and have the kids that were kind of in between quiet, and you'd have the mean-ass kids in the balcony throwing shit at you. You remember?
Yeah. We would. I was always sitting with the good kids.
I tried to just disappear. I didn't want any problems from either one of them,
Well, we always traveled in packs. I mean,
We did, yeah.
Me and Gary and James, and then me and all my cousins.
Yeah.
We'd go some Saturdays. And just
But our whole life,
laid back time.
Our life was really on that road. You didn't leave that road much. I mean, you spent your whole life on that road, and it was James's house mostly.
Yeah, this fellow we called talking about, James Cock, lived right next door to me, and he lived with his mother and his grandparents. That was his grandparents' house, and it was a beautiful old house. I ended up buying the house in the 90s and living in it for a few short years, and there was a beautiful, a lot of wood in the house, and French doors opened up into this, what they called the little back porch.
Right.
It was a long back porch. Yeah. It was originally, it was the back porch. And then they closed it in, and it became James's bedroom, which became our hangout,
Yeah.
And that's where we listened to...
they added a bedroom to the back of it.
Yeah, they added a bedroom for Wayne back there.
You know who built that house? My daddy's brother, Harry.
Oh, okay.
The original middle original part was built by Harry.
He
Herrin.
probably built a lot of them houses on that road.
Yeah, he built all the way down to the end. The last one he built was Peterson's house.
Yeah. But in James's and of course we called it the little back porch too, but it was James's bedroom.
Yeah.
And that's where we listened to the Beatles.
Because you had your own outdoor.
Uh-huh.
You could walk in and out
Yeah,
of the bedroom.
he had a screen door that exited right into the backyard.
That's right.
And so we'd lay on that back porch and wood floors on that back porch, just listen to Meet the Beatles, their first album on a little tiny portable stereo.
Yes, sir.
And 45s, old 45s.
Yeah.
You remember Meet Me at Midnight Mary?
Remember that?
And Moody River, Pat Boone.
And one of my favorite ones he had, I always loved, was California Girls by the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
That was my favorite one he had put on, you know.
And then we'd run out in the yard and play barefoot until Mama'd call us in for supper.
Yeah, we would. And it was all day long in the summer, and then always on the weekends. We got to the point other neighborhoods would come challenge us.
Yeah, when we got
football
older, we'd
games.
have those football games in the pasture back there.
Yeah, and nobody left victorious when they challenged us because we had all the angles figured out on the field.
We had the two big guys,
And then
James and Greg.
Yeah, and we had these guys called the Birch Brothers that were all weightlifters. Later had their own weightlifting store and all.
They opened up a gym.
And they showed up.
They showed up and challenged
They showed
us.
up to show us what other part of town could do. They don't want to talk about it today.
They came and played in Brogan boots. That's how they didn't take them off. They played in Brogan boots, and we're out there, taking it to them. You know?
We had all the angles down to the point we knew exactly if James threw it or whoever quarterbacking, somebody was going to be there to catch it. We had all those angles, you know. We just beat the hell out of them, and they don't remember it today for some reason.
Yeah, it was special.
I still got hard feelings about it.
Well, a lot of people, including ourselves, left with injuries.
Yeah,
That's
I got
what
a
I'm
broke
talking about in the
collarbone.
phone. I mean, in
Y'all
the
are
song.
barefooted and they got
In the song, Black Eyes and Broken Bones and stuff. There was a lot of that went on back there.
There's a twist of a bat, that Dave's life would be different today.
It would be.
Gary hit the ball and the bat
I was
broke.
kneeling in the on-deck circle
And the
just
bat started
with
circling.
a big smile on my face, and Gary hit the thing and tossed that bat. The bat wasn't even a bat.
It
Had
broke.
already broken. There was no knob on the end, so it was just a jagged stop there, and then the head of the bat was up here, and he slugged the ball and pitched the bat backwards, and it went spiraling round and round and round right at me, and the big end hit me right in the eye right there.
Oh,
If it
wow.
had been the
other end.
jagged end, I'd have been Dr. Hook.
Yeah.
One-eyed Dave.
Yeah.
Weren't you also the one that we were throwing the golf balls up in the tree, it come down and hit you in the eye?
I don't remember that accident, but I caught a lot of head injuries throughout my childhood. That's probably made me
Or
who I
baseball.
am.
We were throwing something up in the trees, and it was coming out and hitting limbs. Don't you remember?
I don't remember
It
that.
hit you in the head, it seemed like.
No, I remember getting thumbed in the eye on a tackle.
I remember that, too.
Yeah.
Somebody got hit in the eye from
And
the
you
balls.
got a collarbone.
Yeah, Greg broke my collarbone and had to take me to the hospital. And Dr. Bickerstaff set me drunk.
Yeah.
It was on a Sunday, and he come off the golf course drunk
Yeah.
and set my collarbone drunk.
He didn't feel a thing.
No,
No, he didn't.
but golly, that was something else. That was our whole life every day.
Yeah.
You didn't really venture out much. Pick and Save got built in '65. That was the first store to leave the city of Waycross.
Yeah.
And everybody started shopping there. Before that, you went downtown
It
only.
was really the first superstore.
Yeah.
It preceded Walmarts and
All the
places like
retail.
that. Everything was there. I mean, it
Well,
was.
before that, all the retail was in the city. You went under the underpass and ended up in the city for Cresses and McCrory's and stuff.
Yeah.
That's the first one that changed the course of retail history for Waycross.
Pick and Save had record albums, jewelry department, restaurant, pharmacy,
everything.
Everything.
What kind of musical performances were in Waycross back in the day?
Well,
there were venues around, and
the
a
teen
lot of
dances,
old country bands, and the teen dances.
Johnny B. Moss has put on the B Baby Hops back then. They were quite well known, and he brought acts in from all over the Southeast in Florida and Georgia, and a lot of those acts ended up being major artists later, in different bands.
The Candymen.
Yeah, and he booked a lot of them. And
this is all Is this all at City Auditorium? Or?
Yeah, City Auditorium, National Guard Armory, and that little American Legion building over by the Atlantic Coast Bank, Marist Bank now, and then the rec department had some. And that's the four I remember the most.
A lot of
and
local
he also
bands
brought in
played.
some major acts. He brought in the Shower of the Stars in '65 that had Gary Lewis Playboys, Dale Shannon,
I was at that
Booker
one,
T and the MGs, Hullabaloos, Bobby Goldsboro. And that's the one the Rolling Stones were supposed to be the headline act. But something happened with Keith Richards on a bust or something, and they had to change him to Gary Lewis and Playboys.
Supposed to come to Waycross?
Yeah, and it turned out Gary Lewis Playboys' first live concert was at that contest.
At Memorial Stadium.
Yeah, that was his first live concert with the Playboys. And then the next year, Johnny B. on his farewell show brought the Where the Action Is show with the Young Rascals as headliners, and had the Knickerbockers and Billy Joe Royal and B.J. Thomas and Keith Allison, and Where the Action Is Dancers, the one that danced on TV. And that was his farewell show. He was moving to Atlanta.
He was like a local radio personality on WACL.
Yeah. And him and Judy Seymour were booking things together. And Judy ended up moving to Jacksonville in '66 and marrying Ronnie Van Zant.
Mm-hmm. She was Waycross.
Yeah, now she's Judy Van Zant, of course. Right. And that was that '60s period. But even after Johnny B, there were dances every weekend. You had a dance to go to a Little City Auditorium, National Guard Armory, or Jenkins Street, they called it, or the rec department. I mean, there'd be more than one every weekend.
What year did 95 come through, and how did that change?
What
things?
What's that?
95.
I-95.
When I-95 come through.
Oh, that was
it used to be
late
US
60s
1 was
probably.
the way. That was how you traveled north out of Florida, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it definitely affected. US 1 was the main artery.
Yeah.
right through
Prior
Waycross.
to that, and all these little beautiful little motels and
Neil Young's biography he wrote here just in recent years, he mentioned in there when he was a child, every year his daddy would take him family to Florida, and they would travel US 1, and he said one of his greatest memories is the small South Georgia towns he went through.
You reckon he ever
This
ate
was
at
one
the
of 'em.
Green Frog?
Sure, that's where he got that high tone at. I'll take some frog eggs. Frog legs, I mean.
Neil Young. Well, I reckon it's time for a story from Uncle Dave Tales of the Week from Dog Hill to Tripoli and back. And this one is very relevant to our guest tonight.
Okay.
It's called Uncle Vance Named It Dog Hill.
There we go.
The house I grew up on was cut. All right, you can edit that out. The house I grew up in was on a dirt road. In the early years, it was sandy enough that I bogged down learning how to ride that old blue Schwinn bicycle from Western Auto. So I would heave it off the ground and push it back up the small hill until I was home. That home on Mount Pleasant Road was as sweet a solace of cinder block shelter and solitude as I've ever felt. Surrounded by family and friends, our neighborhood was idyllic. Mama, a military bride and young mother, bought the house when Daddy was stationed overseas in the early 50s. she took great comfort in knowing her older sister's family lived just next door. The Air Force took us to Tripoli, Libya, Albany, Georgia, and Tampa, Florida, but our home was always in Waycross. In 1966, Daddy retired from the service, and we moved back to Mount Pleasant Road for good. Following the death of Mama's daddy, we set up a mobile home in our backyard for Grandma Carter and my Uncle Vance. Poor old Vance didn't sleep well in his new environs, serenaded by the nightly howling, yapping, and barking of the second most populous community on Mount Pleasant Road, the dogs. In a state of insomniac unrest, Vance proclaimed his new address, Dog Hill. Boy, the times we had growing up on Dog Hill, me and my older brother Gary, and neighbors James Cock, Greg Griffin, and Billy Ray Herrin were the original Dog Hill gang. James Cock lived right next door with his mama, a former Army nurse, and her parents, Big Granny and Little Granny Lots. Their yard was a spacious haven for us young'uns. In the 50s, they had owned a bull that was kept in the deepest part of the backyard that they called the pasture. By the 60s, the bull was history and the pasture was ours. We bled and died in that pasture on Saturdays, playing football, baseball, and soccer. Black eyes, broken bones, and barbed wire lacerations were our normal rites of passage. When we were young, we sought refuge in James's bedroom, a long, rambling room the width of the house with a pine wood ceiling, floor, and walls. We'd sprawl out on that floor, listening to 45 RPM records. Moody River by Pat Boone, Joey Powers' Midnight Mary, and the first Beatles album on Capitol, Meet the Beatles. As we grew, so did our interests, and it was once again James's bedroom where I got my first taste of beer, puffed on my first cigarette, and smoked my first joint. That's just what you did in the 60s and 70s. And soon the nicknames came. Brother Gary was Tick, so named for crawling the inside walls and windows of a school bus in college. Greg Griffin was Slick, so named for his consummate attention to fashion and grooming. James Cock was Sharky, so named because of his no-holds-barred competitiveness in anything we did. Billy Ray Herrin was Birdlegs Ray, so named because his legs were so skinny it looked like he was riding a chicken. Me, I was Lonesome Dave because, well, I guess because I was the youngest of the Dog Hill gang, and the older guys didn't include me in all of their devious departures until I came of age. High school graduations came and went, and soon enough we all had to start making life choices. Tick was the oldest and drew a low draft number. He joined the Air Force, managed to avoid Vietnam, and was stationed in Cornwall, England. Slick got hired by Southern Bell and moved off to Atlanta in a brown Ford Pinto. Sharky, Birdlegs Ray, and I gave a good college try towards a higher education and failed. We all got married, some of us time and time again, and fathered a whole new generation of Dog Hillers. Over the years, though, we never lost touch and have had each other's back through trials and triumphs. This band of brothers loved, laughed, won, lost, struggled, and shared the innocence and beauty of a childhood on Dog Hill that bound us together for life. There's no saying you can't choose your family. I'm glad I didn't have a choice. My Dog Hill friends were and always will be my family.
That's good. Good story there. Very good one.
Appreciate you coming by and being our guest tonight.
Oh, hell yeah. Shit,
good
man.
times.
I love it.
Folks, we thank you for joining us again. We hope that you'll like us and subscribe to us and
Rate and review.
Right.
And we'll see you next time.
When the cold black water finds its way across through your veins, it just might say you just might see your face.